What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my top 12 2024 tight end rankings for fantasy football. I've already gone through my running back, wide receiver, and quarterback rankings, so the tight end position is the last one we have here. We're going to be splitting these tight ends up into tiers, and I feel like this is a really interesting year for tight ends. In previous seasons, there have really only been like a few top guys that you really want to draft, and then everyone else you're kind of just taking darts later on in the draft. I feel like it's pretty deep at this point. There's lots of young talent kind of rising up. There are some veterans here that maybe are slipping a little bit, but are still relevant. But I also don't have a ton of confidence that any of these guys are going to go out and have like a truly elite ceiling, like that 17, 18 plus points per game. So I feel like the position's just in a very unique spot right now. And let's just dive right into it. So we're going to start off in tier 1 with Sam Laporta as my tight end 1. He's coming off a rookie season where he averaged 14.1 PPR points per game. This was the second most points per game for a rookie tight end, and at a position that typically really struggles to produce as a rookie. So I feel like we have to feel great about Sam Laporta here. Naturally, he just should continue to get better, improve, have a larger role in this offense. So I think it's fair to have Sam Laporta here up as my tight end 1. Now also in tier 1, we're going to go with Travis Kelce here. He was the tight end 1 in points per game last year, and it seems crazy because he was still the tight end 1, but he kind of slipped down to 14.6 points per game. It was actually his first season under 15 PPR points per game since 2016, and I think we do have to acknowledge here, there is risk with drafting Travis Kelce. He's 34 years old. Like, he has the risk to just kind of fall off, really reduce in terms of his production. Injury concerns obviously increase the older you get. But on the other hand, I do think this Chiefs offense is going to be much better than they were in 2024. From 2018 to 2022, this was a top 6 unit in points per game every single year. Last year, they fell to 14th. So if Kelce just stays the same skill-wise, but the offense gets way better with the new weapons they brought in, then I could easily see him doing better than he did last year. But you also have to factor in that fall-off could be coming. Like, 34 years old, even though his longevity has been crazy, like at this point, most tight ends are already kind of cooked. So it's something we have to look out for, but I still think he belongs here in tier 1. And then behind Travis Kelce, I'm going to go with Trey McBride. And he became a full-time starter in week 8. And after that, over the next 10 games, he averaged 15 PPR points per game. That would have been the tight end 1 over the full season. He led all tight ends in target rate, and he had the second most yards per route run. So when he was on the field, Trey McBride was an absolute monster. He was making plays. He was getting volume, and I'm just really excited about this Cardinals offense in general. You have Kyler back, for a full season, now removed from that ACL tear. You add Marvin Harrison Jr., I think a lot of these weapons here on this offense are going to be feasting. And then my final tier 1 tight end is going to be Mark Andrews. He was the tight end 5 in points per game last year, but he actually would have been tied for the tight end 1 if we removed the final game where he left with injury. So it's always important to kind of point those things out. Leaving a game with injury can really just skew your entire season production. So if Andrews didn't get hurt, he likely would have been up there with those like higher end tight end 1s. And it still kind of feels like we're chasing that Andrews peak season that he had in 2021, where he averaged 17.7 points per game. Like, it's good to know that that peak ceiling is there. He has that upside, but based on his 2019, 2020, 2022, and 2023 seasons, somewhere in like the tight end 3 to tight end 5 area is probably more realistic. But I still think he belongs here in tier 1, given that he showcased that ceiling and has been a pretty consistent, higher end tight end 1 over the last 5 seasons. Now shifting into tier 2, we're going to go with Dalton Kincaid, and I feel like Kincaid is a prime year 2 breakout candidate. He was the tight end 14 in points per game last year, which doesn't sound crazy, but without a like Sam Laporta crazy rookie season, I feel like we would have been feeling pretty good about that season. Coming in, rookie tight end, you had some target competition there with Diggs, Gabe Davis, not stacked, but there were some established weapons there, and Kincaid came in. He had a decent role. I think he's going to see a much larger role here in year 2 with Diggs gone, a full year of NFL experience. He had the second most slot snaps in 2023, so it seems like he's kind of locked into that big slot role, which I think gives a lot of upside at the tight end position. And then also, he just is going to have a lot of upside because if he hits as a player within this Josh Allen-led offense, his ceiling is going to be very, very high because this offense is probably going to be a really impressive unit. Then my second tier 2 tight end is going to be Kyle Pitts, and I feel like this should finally be the Kyle Pitts breakout season. I know a lot of people have been saying that for the last few years. I've definitely been in on him in previous seasons, but he finally has real quarterback play. Arthur Smith is gone. We have to remember this was still the dude that went for over 1,000 receiving yards as a rookie. You don't really see that. Like Sam Laporta didn't do that. Kyle Pitts did. And he is still so young. Like you think he's had 3 years in the NFL. He might be getting up there in age a little bit. The dude is 23 years old. Like, he's younger than Dalton Kincaid. I think this is the year that Kyle Pitts breaks out. So if he's available here in like the mid-tier tight end 1 area, I'm just going to have to take the swing, even though he's been disappointing early on in his career. And then my final tier 2 tight end is going to be Evan Ingram. And I feel like you're probably going to be able to draft him a little bit lower than the other guys in this tier. But he's coming off a very impressive fantasy season. He was the tight end 4 in points per game. And this wasn't like a super fluky season where like he really hit in the touchdown department and we don't think it's sustainable. He just commanded an insane amount of volume. He led all tight ends with 143 targets, 114 receptions. He was second in target share and yak, third in receiving yards. So really the only thing he missed in was the touchdown department. He didn't come through there. I think he only scored 4 touchdowns, which for all that volume, like, you'd expect a little bit more than that. This offense lost Calvin Ridley, but they added Brian Thomas Jr., Gabe Davis. I think Brian Thomas Jr. will have a nice career. Who knows how big of a rookie year he has. Gabe Davis, not a huge fan of him. So maybe the volume decreases a little bit, but I still feel like he's going to have a pretty huge role in this offense. And maybe if he hits in the touchdown department, then we're really looking at a high upside ceiling here out of Evan Ingram. Now pivoting into tier 3, we're going to start off with George Kittle. He was the tight end 6 in points per game last year, and I think this is something I talked about in my Dynasty Rankings video, but George Kittle is always going to be someone who is a better real-life tight end than he is a fantasy option. From 2018 to 2023, George Kittle has decreased his fantasy points per game in every single season. He has so much target competition with Debo, Ayuk, CMC. You now add in Ricky Pearsall. He is a great player, but without multiple injuries around him to a guy like CMC, one or multiple of the wide receivers, I just don't think George Kittle has that peak ceiling anymore, which, is going to leave him here in tier 3. Then right behind him, we're going with David Njoku. And when we saw Joe Flacco take over at quarterback, Njoku just turned into an absolute monster. 16 plus PPR points in his last 5 games. That includes their 1 playoff game. The problem here is that if he has Deshaun Watson at quarterback, and Watson is the same dude that's been, producing over the last 2 seasons or not producing, like that's an issue because Deshaun Watson's been terrible. If Watson somehow returns to his pre-suspension form, I think David Njoku could have a monster season. Like if you're telling me right now that Deshaun Watson from 2017, 2018 is the quarterback, David Njoku at worst for me is going to be in tier 2. If you're telling me that it's the, Deshaun Watson we've seen over the last 2 seasons, at best, he's probably the last guy in this tier. So you kind of have to take some risk here. I think talent-wise, Njoku does have some upside, but just is he going to be getting that strong quarterback play that we need? Because when he did get solid quarterback play, someone who's going to go out there and sling it, he was putting up great numbers with Joe Flacco and looking like a truly dominant tight end. Now the final tier 3 tight end here, my tight end 10, it's going to be Jake Ferguson, and he actually finished as the tight end 10 in points per game last year. He was top 10 in targets, receptions, receiving yards, yak, and touchdowns. I also think he has the upside to just hit more in the touchdown department than he did last year. He scored 5 touchdowns, but he was on the team that led the NFL in passing touchdowns, and Ferguson led all tight ends in red zone targets. So if Dak repeats with another big season and Jake Ferguson is as involved in the red zone as he was last year, I think we'll probably see him increase that 5 touchdown number. I do think his overall ceiling is capped just because he's not a great athlete. I don't think he's ever going to be a high ceiling tight end, but he can give you 10 plus points per game. You're fine throwing him in there week to week. Could hit some 2 touchdown games potentially as like a ceiling play. He's going to be out there a lot, running a lot of routes, coming off a solid year 2. So I think Jake Ferguson's an interesting option here as like a back end tight end 1. And then my final tier 4, we're going to start off with Brock Bowers. This is not a great landing spot, especially here in year 1. You have poor quarterback play, either Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell, and then not only do you have not great quarterback play, but you have a lot of target competition with Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, who played really well, especially early on last season. And then we also know that rookie tight ends typically don't tend to play well. The one thing I will say here about Brock Bowers is I feel like people are going to point to Kyle Pitts and say, like, he was a great prospect, an early pick, but he didn't get, the production early on because he didn't have the quarterback play. And I think it's a fair point, right? They have some similarities. But in terms of their play style, they're not super similar. Kyle Pitts had a much higher ADOT in college where he kind of needed quarterback play, and that's probably something maybe, we should have picked up on. But for Brock Bowers here, he's a little bit of a lower ADOT guy. He's kind of a player you just need to get the ball into his hands. Like, he had rushing production, which you don't see at the tight end position. Typically, that's going to like wide receivers, the end arounds. On that Georgia offense that had a lot of solid weapons when he was there, those end around opportunities were going to Brock Bowers. So I'm not saying the Raiders are going to like use him perfectly, but I don't think he's as reliant on top quarterback play as others. And at this point, right, we're like out of the ceiling tight end area. So if you're going to let me take a swing on a Brock Bowers, maybe you could double up on another like dude you think is safer. I think this is a fine spot to take him here at the tight end 11. And then my final tight end is going to be TJ Hawkinson. He's actually coming off a season where he was tied for Kelsey as the tight end 1 in points per game. It was his best fantasy season of his career, but I just am not super in on him heading into 2024. He tore his ACL in week 16, which is just tough when we're looking at his time frame to return here. I'd say like the earliest possible return date is like week 5 territory. But even then, he's going to be working his way back to 100%. Even if he's playing, he's not going to be the same dude as before. And then also, who knows what the quarterback play looks like, right? You're going from Kirk Cousins and then I guess some sort of combination last year once he got hurt. But now you're going to either, a rookie J.J. McCarthy or Sam Darnold. You have Justin Jefferson, obviously, who's going to be the wide receiver 1. Jordan Addison, who should be taking a leap. So maybe he ends up putting it together later on in the season, but I feel like you're expecting him to return pretty early on, play well when he gets back, and then you're also expecting him to beat out guys like Jefferson and Addison, or at least, compete with them in terms of targets and production on an offense that I don't know if it's going to be as pass heavy as it was last year. So not super high on TJ Hawkinson. Obviously, if he was healthy heading into the season, he'd be way higher. He'd probably, be up there in tier 1, but unfortunately, that is not the case for him here. So that's going to wrap it up for my top 12 tight ends. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Which tight ends are you higher on, lower on? Which guys are you looking to target in your fantasy drafts this year? Thank you all for stopping by as always, and I will see you all in the next one.